Hello and welcome to Addis News Hour. I'm Daniel Kasahun with the news. Commissioner
وانا درسان نشاقر والد في دنيا يالي لميهم زمانش لميهم قانش توبنا تاقاري وانا درساش አዲስ ነው እለቱ ሲነጋ ሌሊቱ ሰላም ነው ፍቅር ያውዳመት ነገር ወንድሜ እህቴ ተጫውቺ በሞቴ ጭንቀቱ
Commissioner for the National Disaster Risk Management Commission, Mtuku Kasa, called upon international aid agencies operating in Ethiopia to react out people who are in need of support in Amhara and Afar regional state. Talking to ETV, Mtuku said TPLF's looting and vandalizing of public properties deteriorates the situation. Aulatek Lamariam has more.
The National Disaster Risk Management Commission is mandated to manage and handle hardening situations. In an exclusive interview with ETV English, Commissioner Mtuku Kasa called upon international aid agencies operating in Ethiopia to reach out people who are in need of support in Amhara and Afar regional states.
As long as they have been working with the government of Ethiopia, they have to fulfill their mandate. They have to show their solidarity with the government of Ethiopia and try to mobilize resources, address without any hurdle to the needy people in other condition in Amhara regional state as well as in Afar. They have to show the same commitment they have been showing in Tigray regional state.
The commissioner said the government established emergency collection center to reach out the recently displaced people in Afar and Amhara regional states.
So that to the end we have established emergency coordination center ECC at Bahar Dar and incident command post at Dase and Gondar, through which we will be able to coordinate the overall effort of all UN agencies, bilateral and international NGO, including federal ministries and regional bureaus, to address the needy ones in North Wollo, Wagamara and North Gondar.
Mtuku said TPLF's looting and vandalizing of public properties deteriorates the situation in those regions.
Well, as far as TPLF is concerned, it is not abide to the international humanitarian law. So looting and vandalizing of food and non-food items it is a clear indication of the position of TPLF. So that the government always denounce the evil acts of TPLF and try to float all wrong and evil doings of TPLF to the international community.
In addition to large number of people affected by the war in Tigray, millions have been displaced in the state of Afar and Amhara because of repeated incursions by the TPLF, making the humanitarian response more challenging.
While the United Nations High Commission of Human Rights has only released preliminary reports on investigation results of human rights violations in Tigray, the TPLF lobbyists are busy spreading lies about massacres being committed. Surprisingly, the United Nations investigators were not able to reach the town of Aksum, the hotspot in Tigray, where a massacre is allegedly committed due to sudden changes in the security situation and in the conflict dynamics. The TPLF lobbyists have been continuing their propaganda to hide the reality on the ground. Jerusalem has more.
The Ethiopian Defense Force have continued the war effort to stamp out the TPLF terrorist group and restore peace and security in the country. However, the TPLF's foray into Afar and Amhara has resulted in hideous killings, lootings, and colossal damage to the communities. Meanwhile, the joint investigation by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the United Nations Human Rights Office into alleged violations committed by all parties to the conflict in Tigray have not been finalized. The preliminary findings of a joint investigation by the UN Human Rights Office and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission into alleged violations in Tigray have been submitted to the UN Human Rights Council. Though on September 13, Monday, the UN's Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet stated the UN investigators were not able to reach the holy city of Aksum due to sudden changes in the security situation and in the conflict dynamics. However, Chief of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, Daniel Bekkele, told VOA the Commission is still analyzing the information and evidence gathered and is not ready to share any findings and conclusions at this stage. He said the Commission's findings, conclusions and recommendations will be contained in the final report of the joint investigation to be published November 1. On the other side, protesters deliberately fed by TPLF's diaspora propagandists have been spreading malicious their propaganda to call for an independent investigation into alleged human rights violations in Ethiopia's Tigray conflict. However, the reality is clear, because at this moment not only the town of Aksum, but also the whole towns and districts of the Tigray state, except those claimed by the Amhara, is under the TPLF. Therefore, the UN investigators were not able to reach the city of Aksum due to the TPLF troops occupying it and being unwilling to let them conduct investigations. Knowing full well how the international media outlets are already biased in favor of the TPLF, they feed them with unsubstantiated reports of serious human rights situations, conveniently blaming it on Ethiopian and allied forces. What's even disappointing here is that even most African media outlets are following suit and helping TPLF lobbyists' propaganda take shape. Fortunately, though, Commissioner Bachelet reports that TPLF's brutal troops have perpetrated many human rights abuses since gaining control of parts of Tigray and expanding to neighboring regions.
During the period under review, the Tigrayan forces have allegedly been responsible for attacks on civilians, including indiscriminate killings resulting in nearly 76,500 people displaced in Afar and an estimated 200,000 in Amhara.
Most international media outlets have deliberately left Amhara and Afar to melt on their own while trying to create false images of rights violations in Tigray. That's why the Ethiopian government is still striving to international community to recognize violations of civilians across the country by the TPLF terrorist group.
It is high time that the world wakes up to the reality that the TPLF is the aggressor and not the victim in this tragedy.
Gideon reiterated the position of the government that all credible allegations of serious human rights violations that had been reported in relation to the situation in Tigray and other regions in Ethiopia should be thoroughly investigated. He criticized the temporal scope of the joint investigation by the Ethiopian and United Nations Human Rights Commissions, noting that the cutoff was the declaration of the ceasefire of the government, meaning that many violations would not be covered and that the investigation would be incomplete and might not give a full picture of the situation.
አንዳንድ ጊዜያት እንዳውሎ ነፋስ ናቸው ሞገዳቸው ይበረታል አንዳንድ ጊዜያት ወጀብ አላቸው ማዕበላቸው ይገስፋል አንዳንድ ጊዜያት እሳት ናቸው ወላፈናቸው ያግላል አንዳንድ ጊዜያት የጦርነት ናቸው የጦፈ ፍልሚያ ውስጥ ይታሉ አንዳንድ ጊዜያት ይሁሉ አልፎ የጸጥታ ይሆናሉ ሰላም በመድሪቷ ላይ ይነክሳል ጊዜ ይለዋወጣል እኛ ግን ጸንተን እንቆማለን ሀገር ማለት እኛ ነን
You're watching Addis News Hour. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs vows to capitalize on its digital diplomatic efforts to effectively encounter external pressure. The ministry began training Ethiopian diplomats who are soon to be deployed 4 diplomatic missions in different countries amid disclosure of close to 30 embassies abroad. Kasanchani reports.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia said it has been undertaking a wide range of efforts to modernize the nation's diplomatic endeavor on political, economic and social reform programs, according to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Demeke Mekonnen. The ministry has started training its diplomats, aiming at equipping them with the necessary skills to effectively respond to current diplomatic challenges.
The organizational reform needs right professionals at the right time and place. Major and effective manpower will be assigned not by numbers but with personal acumen. We're working to make major organizational change for a better diplomatic mission. The reform envisions to effectively using digital diplomacy, thereby maximizing efforts of diplomatic missions.
The Deputy Premier also underscored the ministry has been undertaking intensive organizational study to support the reform with concrete findings.
This institutional reform is being carried out based on the country's historical relations and power interests forged with other countries over the past many years. It's now high time to deploy skilled and effective diplomats to protect our interests in the international diplomatic arena. That's why we called most of our missions abroad and started this training to redefine our goals.
Olu Abdi, president of the Africa Leadership Excellence Academy, on his part said on the occasion that education and training activities are underway to produce qualified diplomats and leaders to make Ethiopia effective in spearheading its diplomatic ties with the rest of the world.
Cuban ambassador to Ethiopia, Wilmer Thomas, says United States intervention in Ethiopia's domestic affairs is against international law and against the UN Charter. She also says the US goal in sanctioning leads to countries' change of regime and not human rights protection. Sintayo Tamrat reports.
There is no other country except Cuba that has received the most severe and longest sanctions by the US successive governments. In 2007, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to end a half-century US blockade on Cuba. On that event, Cuban Foreign Minister quoted a declassified United States government document from 1960 by then Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs, Lester DeWitt Mallory, saying that the purpose of the embargo was to weaken the economic life of Cuba, denying money supplies to Cuba, to decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government. And the US action against Cuba was dubbed an act of genocide as defined by the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and an act of economic warfare under the conclusions reached at the 1909 London Naval Conference.
The President of the United States has no right at all to pass judgment on any other sovereign nation on this planet. Having powerful nuclear weapons provides no right whatsoever to tread upon the rights of the peoples of the other 191 countries represented here. And the determination and courage of the peoples should not be underestimated when it comes to defending their rights. After all, what prevails is not the power of cannons, but the fairness of the ideas for which you are fighting.
In this context, Cuban ambassador to Ethiopia, Wilmer Thomas, told ETV English that the blockade that has been hugely violating rights of the Cuban populations has brought huge impact on the life of Cubans.
In the last 2 years during the pandemic, you have seen also the cruelty of the blockade because it has impact in Cuba's ability to fight against the pandemic. No regulations were lifted of the blockade during the time of the pandemic. And even more regulations were added during Trump administration, we added 243 more measures to tighten the blockade and make our life even more difficult. But because despite all those difficulties, as you mentioned, for 60 years now, we have been able to resist and endure and develop. And we are very proud that although it has cost a lot, and it has been, 7 out of 10 Cubans have lived all their life under this blockade.
She also says the U.S. goal in sanctioning countries leads to change of regime and not human rights protection.
Actually, the blockade is the highest and the violation of the human rights of the entire Cuban people and the main obstacle to our development up to now. But the real reasons they wanted to maintain the blockade is that they wanted to change the system that the Cuban people give to itself. They wanted to change our government, and despite the majority of the population supporting the government, they keep on trying to overthrow the Cuban government. They have been doing that. They cannot accept that just 90 miles from the US, we have a different kind of government to the one they wanted to impose on us.
The current U.S. intervention in Ethiopia's domestic affairs is against international law and UN Charter, Ambassador Vilma Thomas said.
We are against any sort of unilateral sanctions. We think that unilateral sanctions are against international law, are against the Charter of the UN, and are against the basis of the multilateral system. No countries have really the right to impose sanctions on others. I think the way to handle any kind of situation should be multilateral cooperation, constructive engagement. That's what we have been promoting at a multilateral level, and those are the basis of in which any situation should be addressed. And this is the case of Ethiopia.
Speaking on the Ethio-Cuba relation, the two countries have now attained a very good cooperation with a number of agreements signed and some being implemented in areas like education, health, technology, trade and agriculture, the ambassador mentioned.
Our relations are in a very good shape right now. We have a lot of agreements we have been working on. Some of them have already been signed and are being implemented. And some others are in a very advanced stage of negotiation. We are working in agreements in health, in education, in science and technology, agreement between our chambers of commerce in order to promote also our trade relations.
Ethiopia and Cuba have strong bilateral ties for over 45 years now.
Ethiopian ambassador to Italy, Damitu Handisa, met with Deputy Foreign Minister of the Hellenic Republic, Ambassador Temsoltis Demiris, in Athens and discussed on bilateral issues of mutual concern. During the discussion, Ambassador Damitu briefed the Greek Deputy Foreign Minister on latest developments in Ethiopia, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and the Ethiopia-Sudan border dispute. The two sides highlighted the long-lasting bilateral relations between the two countries and agreed to work together to further strengthen the relationship. Ambassador Damitu has also discussed with the Hellenic Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry Executive Director. She invited the Greek businessmen to tap trade and investment potentials, and Ethiopia calling the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry to facilitate pre-investment tour to Ethiopia.